Happy Devils Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address, episode 158, titled Burying the Devils Season. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with Pucks and Pitchforks blog editor-in-chief, Nick Villano, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Primetime Radio Network. Oh, do we have a great podcast for you tonight? We got James O'Brien from NBC's Pro Hockey Talk. Nick has a lot of questions for him. I read the questions earlier. Lots of questions about your New Jersey Devils as the Devils come back home playing tomorrow night at the Prudential Center against the Buffalo Sabres, I believe. Is it the Buffalo Sabres they're playing tomorrow? I think so. I'm losing track. Yeah. These are the dog days of getting the season done and over with.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, and I was kind of talking about this with my wife where I was just like, I just look at the page sometimes. It's like, I don't know what else to write. Like, it seems a little too early to do off-season things because you have the whole playoffs to get through first. And it's too late now to talk about what's left, right? You know, like analysis and stuff like that because it's just been, you know.
It's too early to fire people.
I know. Yeah, I just think that we're in like this weird thing where it's like just, you know, and if, you know, I know a lot of people will say, well, we've just been riding out the season for the past 3 months. It's like, yeah, in a way, kind of, yeah. But, you know, at least it was like, you still sometimes looked forward to game day and still, you know, got a little upset when they lost. Now it's just like, I don't know. I had fun watching them beat the Vegas Golden Knights. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about ending the coaching career of Peter DeBoer because the Devils might have just did that, Sam. Does he get a fifth job? Does Peter DeBoer get a fifth hockey job?
Of course he does. He's Peter DeBoer.
Yeah, he probably will.
He's Peter DeBoer. Everybody's looking for a new coach. Even good teams are looking for a new coach.
That's wild. Well, he got Gallant fired, basically.
Yeah, you know, and look, that display, and I'm going to ask you, Nick, and we're going to ask our guest when he comes on in about 10 minutes. The way the Devils won the game, some of the stuff that they were doing is not really sustainable. Getting outshot badly. I think it was like 44-28, I believe. All those little things, you know, the Hamburglar stole the show. He made a lot of great saves. But again, it gives you a heart attack. Is this type of style and this type of winning sustainable long term? It felt good the other night, but here are some of the good things that I saw. Nico Hischier, dump and chase. I talked about that often. Go with the simple plays. Don't make it something out of nothing. Regroup and reset. And let the other team make mistakes, and then you take advantage of it. So I did see some good things, but there were some things that I'm just kind of like, no goaltender should be shelled like that with so many shots. I mean, we're talking about high-quality chances, but credit Fitzgerald, the NFZ, filling the defense, the blue line with big guys like Kevin Ball, Dougie Hamilton. They took up a lot of space, a lot of real estate, where a lot of those shots by design did not get through because these guys are absolutely a disruption with their size in front of the net. It's almost impossible to get a good look at it when you're shooting.
I feel like this is the best Kevin Ball has played in the NHL.
Yeah.
Like, you know, this is the best I've seen him because, you know, I was on the record as I was worried about putting Ball with Hamilton because the last time Ball and Hamilton were together, they were terrible together. Ball really pulled down Hamilton, and Hamilton wasn't ever able to lift him up. There was just instead of Ball giving Hamilton opportunities offensively, instead Hamilton was making up for defensive miscues and not getting those offensive chances. So, and here's the thing: I want to bring up Hamilton real quick and I'm probably going to write about this tonight. This is what I'm going to write about tonight. I kind of alluded to it earlier. I'm not worried about Dougie Hamilton. I'm not worried about him at all. Not even a little bit. Not one iota. I'm not worried about the contract. I'm not worried about his regression. I'm not worried about anything. Yeah, he's made some mistakes since coming back from the injury. I'll admit that absolutely. But fact of the matter is that when we saw him healthy prior to his injury, he was a stud defenseman. And I know for some reason Lindy Ruff was playing Damon Severson more than him, but he was still a stud. It wasn't taking away from his studliness. Him and Ryan Graves, he pulled up Ryan Graves to have Ryan Graves' best offensive season of his career. Maybe, I'd have to look back at some of his Colorado seasons, but maybe his best season or his best season ever. I know Ryan Graves has been on the ice for a lot of goals, but who hasn't been on the ice for a lot of goals this season? Graves is somebody who I've seen do really good things when he was with Hamilton. I think you got your two top pairs in Graves and Hamilton and Siegenthaler and Severson next year. If you're not trading any of them this offseason, because you got a decision to make because Siegenthaler, Severson, and Graves all are up next year in 2023. So you got to decide, do you want to make that your top four? You assume that you can let at least one of them walk away because that's when Luke Hughes is going to be ready to go. You also hope that this was a blip on the radar for Ty Smith, and he's ready in 2023 to take one of those top four spots. And then you might have, your top two left. So you might be able to, get away with letting Graves go. You might be, willing to sell high on Siegenthaler, sell high on Severson after both of them had their best seasons of their career. So you're looking at it right now, and I'm looking at this defense because I had somebody say it's like, oh, they desperately need defensive upgrades, and I don't agree. I think they have the top guy in Severson, or I'm sorry, top guy in they have a top guy in Hamilton. They have a secondary top guy in Severson, and they have two complementary players. Siegenthaler was one of the best defensive defensemen in the league this year. And then Graves, who does a lot right, does some wrong, but does a lot right. So something that you can definitely mold into something. There's just a lot going on for this defense.
Yeah, and, well, they improved on this road trip. They're just playing a cleaner game. But still, I still see some mistakes every once in a while. But one of the things that they were doing that I was pretty impressed with on this road trip was when there's chaos, they had help, they had support from their other teammates out on the ice. Whereas if one player got caught out of position, there was a player backing him up, waiting, and then everything would reset. No harm, no foul. There were a couple close calls, but some of the transitional slides, like if one player is going to a player at the board and then it's kind of caught out of position, another player would slide right in the middle.
Yeah.
Between where the players should be. So I saw a lot of that. That helped out, but again, they swarmed up Hammond in the last game, and the Devils paid a price for that. Seattle, it was just one of those games. It's just one of those games. Yes, I know they're expansion team, but Matty Beniers, scored his first goal. Yada yada yada.
I don't
I'm not
think
a
they
big
played
fan
very
of
well
him
that
right
game.
now.
I wasn't.
Yeah, but
impressed
it
with how
could have
they
gone
played.
either way.
It could have, but they just didn't. It seemed like they were missing a little urgency in that Seattle game.
Yeah. I mean, they could have easily won 4-1-1.
They could have.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
4-1
No,
and
4-1-1.
They went 3-1-1.
Three.
They went
Yeah.
3-1-1.
No, they went. They could have been 4-0. No, 4-1 and no.
What game are you saying they could have won? If they could have won the Seattle game.
If they won the Seattle game, there wouldn't have been a 1. So they could have won. They could have been 4-1 on that trip.
Yeah.
I get confused with that extra point.
Yeah, and then here's the thing: is that Seattle game. Those late games really like take a lot out of you. When we let them come back and tie it, I was like, yeah, I think. Or no, when we didn't score right away in overtime, I was like, yeah, I think this is when I'm going to go to bed. I didn't even watch shootout. I know I shouldn't say that as the head writer of Pucks and Pitchforks and the co-host of this podcast, but at the same time, I also just kind of looked at it and I was like, there's no way they're winning this shootout. Just we've seen this before, so it's kind of funny how that all worked out. But I mean, I'm happy with how they've played overall. It's and I understand that some people want tanking, but I'm happy to see some wins before the end of the season. We have no idea how the lottery is going to go. So, but if we lose, better for the lottery. If we win, better for the situation overall. And we're going to get into some draft stuff. I'm sure we're going to get all of our regulars, Josh Bell, Will Scouch, all of our favorites on to talk draft. But I'm looking at this draft, and I'm not convinced about pretty much anyone. I like Nemec. I like Wright. Excuse me. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Well.
I was gonna mute you.
I was
gonna mute you, but yeah.
Just edit it out of the podcast for the drive.
I'm not gonna do that. I'm too lazy.
That's fine. Anyway, yeah, but I'm not in love with Logan Cooley. I'm not in love with a couple of the other guys that are moving up and down the draft boards. I like some of the guys that Savoy is an interesting player, and there's a couple others that I like. And I'll write a piece over the weekend that'll probably go out on Monday, going over some of the guys at the top there that we should be targeting. But this is the first time in a while, Sam, we don't have multiple first-round picks. We just have our one. So when we do the draft day special, we could go home after an hour.
Yeah.
We don't have to sit there
because
for
last year,
5 hours.
Last couple years was exciting because we had total 5 first-round draft picks. Yeah,
that's fun because we could talk about other players, but for the sake of that night, I'm a little happy that we kind of get it done it over with pretty quickly.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get our next guest. So
okay, go get our guest. I'm excited to talk to James. I've been looking at James's work for a long time, and he's somebody who's always written these funeral pieces. Sam said he didn't want me to say funeral because it's too morbid, but I'm saying it's like funeral pieces. He's burying the Devils, and that's why we have the that's our title tonight, because we're burying the Devils season. It was a disaster, it was a mess, everything went wrong, but there are shades of optimism in everything that we're seeing. Jack Hughes had a phenomenal season. Looks like a super duper star. Jesper Bratt had a phenomenal season. Looks like he's a star. Nico Hischier had the best offensive season he's ever had. And yes, I'm including the rookie season on top in that. Igor Sharangovich showed he's not a one-hit wonder. He's not a fluke. He's a legitimate scorer. And when you look at some of the other things, the penalty kill, after one of the worst seasons for penalty kills in history, the Devils bounced back and had a good penalty kill. And that's thanks to the defensive additions, and that's thanks to players like Jimmy Vesey and things like that. So, there's some veiled optimism here for the Devils. Sam's back already.
I'm back. I'm back with our next guest. His name is James O'Brien. He's from NBC's Pro Hockey Talk. You can find him on Twitter at CycleLikeSedines. James, you're on with Sam and Nick. How are you tonight?
Doing great. Thank you.
Nice to have you on, James. James, I've been looking at your work for a while. I've been wanting to have you on. I just always had trouble finding you and getting in contact with you. So I'm really happy to have you on the show tonight.
Absolutely.
So let's get right into it. Every year I see these, basically, I call them funeral pieces, where you do articles just kind of putting the season to rest. This one was an interesting one. I really enjoyed it, going through it, seeing how you assess the Devils season. And we got to start off the top with the one thing that went the most wrong, and that's goaltending. Number one priority when it comes to upgrades this season. You have to answer questions when it comes to Mackenzie Blackwood. You kind of have to see where Jonathan Bernier is with his injury of the hip. What's your thoughts? Do you see something that could fix the Devils' goaltending situation in the offseason this year, or are you going to have to tell us that Devils fans have to be, a word that we hate, we have to be patient?
I would say 90% patience. Just when you look at the goalie market this summer, it's not a great selection of goalies. That's especially true if the Avalanche signed Darcy Kemper, who after a slow start has been quite good. You also, you don't always know fully how much Darcy Kemper's strong season has to do with playing on the best team in the league. But the more you go through the list, I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury, great at times, not so great at times, 37, not the best fit for the Devils. I don't think anyone wants Mikko Koiskinen that much. So the one good thing for the Devils might just be a matter of motivation. Both Blackwood and next season. And Blackwood's only 25. And, as rough as this season was, if there's ever a sort of fork in the road moment for a goalie, it's this next season, whether Blackwood's with the Devils or some other team. And sometimes goalies come up really big in those contract years, especially goalies that people had some expectations for. You look at someone like Jacob Markstrom, who he took until about his 30s to really establish himself as an elite goalie. And one of his big years that really turned people's heads was a contract year that eventually got him that nice deal with the Flames that looks pretty good right now. If there was a great option, I'd say think about it, because you could either move those one or both of Bernier and Blackwood, but there's just not a great market. I don't expect a lot of good goalies to be dangled in trades. So I think you just have to hope that you put the right players around them, or you just outscore your issues. But, stranger things have happened because goalies are wildly unpredictable.
It's true. It's true. Let me ask you about, since you brought up Kemper, what do you think he costs? If he did leave for another
that's
team,
the big question, right?
Yeah.
I feel like the biggest worry with Darcy Kemper would be term. You look at Philip Grubauer's contract last season, kind of look it up. It was definitely multiple years, and to some extent it made sense for him to get that deal, but for the Kraken, it really didn't. Darcy Kemper is going to turn 32 in May, and I would imagine with how much he's bounced around lately that he'd want term more than anything else. Yeah, so I mean, someone like Grubauer's almost $6 million for
6 years,
6 seasons. So that's, I feel like you might be better off hoping that Blackwood gets his act together to an extent, or the right trade, as poor as it is. We don't even know if Kemper is even going to become a free agent. The Avalanche can surprise you at times. So I just feel like you'd be overstretching for a Kemper, just like someone's probably going to overstretch for a Kadri or someone who's a good player, but when it's a bidding war, then you can get kind of backed into a corner to give the wrong contract out. So, the Devils are an analytics-driven organization to some degree, and that means they probably have access to the sort of expected goals and more advanced goalie stats. Maybe they'll find value where we wouldn't see it, but just looking at the numbers available, I don't know if people would be that much more excited with a kind of what would almost certainly be a bit of a panic move. You look at someone like Peter Mrazek, the Leafs overextended a bit in giving him term, and now they're going to regret it for quite a while. So it's not impossible to get better in that area, but yeah. I think the demand outstrips the supply in this case.
All right, so you also brought up the injuries. Jack Hughes got injured twice. Dougie Hamilton, major injury. He got hit in the face of the pocket. Basically everybody outside of like Dawson Mercer and Jesper Bratt had somewhat of a serious injury or, out for a week or 2 or 3 weeks or something like that. And then you had the goalies, obviously. So when you look at injuries, what's your philosophy? Are you somebody who thinks that injuries are fluky, or are you somebody who thinks that when a team deals with this many injuries, is it something that the Devils should look into? Is it something that they have to, whether it's the coaching staff, the medical staff, the front office, is something they have to look for in themselves and think, like, we need to change something?
Well, I think some teams put themselves into positions to have more injury problems by having older rosters. The Devils are pretty much the opposite. You look at almost all their top players are 20, 23, 27. There's not a lot of older players, and everybody is different, obviously, but generally, the older you get, the more you break down. And like you said, a lot of the injuries the Devils have faced, not just this season, really, when you look at what Nico Hischier faced the year before, where he had COVID, and then I feel like he had a pretty freakish injury after dealing with COVID. They've just had a lot of strange bad luck with young players. I'm sorry?
He got hit in the face with a puck, too, just like Dougie Hamilton. It's been a bad luck.
So, I mean, those are injuries that aren't, like they have congenital hip issues like maybe Tyler Seguin was rumored to have. These are the sort of things that I just feel like are bad luck. And now I will say, I feel like at some point, some NHL team is going to come along and hire the sort of consultants that can give you better insight into when to rest a player, even one that wouldn't strike you as being in an injury risk situation. And I think if the Devils have the budget to put in money into that, sure. But yeah, you just educated guess wise, having such a young roster, I doubt they're going to have more problems like that in the future. Even with Dougie Hamilton, who's like a little older at 28, 29 in that range, his injury was so random. Like, he's 6'6" and he gets hit in the face with a puck. I think that's pretty on the nose, or on the jaw, if you will. So no, I wouldn't worry too much about that for the Devils, unless they just. Sometimes you just get players that just, for whatever reason, they're built a little differently and they get injured a lot. You look at Sidney Crosby's career. The Penguins in general had a lot of key players that got hurt a lot, and some of that's just bad luck. Some of it's maybe you could be careful in an area, not play a guy who's hurt but not injured when you can get away with it. But for the most part, I wouldn't sweat that too much for the Devils.
So one of the positives of this season was obviously Jack Hughes. He looks like a super duper star. He only played 49 games, but that kind of goes back to the injury stuff. And I think he probably would be back by now if we weren't at the end of the season. So I'm not too worried about that. What I am worried about is kind of how you go about building around Jack Hughes, and what they're going to do. This year, Igor Sharangovich has been with them, and just Brad's been with them, and Holtz has been with them, and they a myriad of guys have just been rigmarole through Jack Hughes' wings, and he had some consistency, but not a ton. Do you think that building around Jack Hughes, say the goaltending issues they are going with Blackwood again, or whatever the case may be. Say that's what they're going to do. Do you say that the next biggest issue for the Devils is building around Jack Hughes?
Absolutely. I think it's kind of a multi-layered question in a way that one big question with the Devils as far as pressing needs goes is Lindy Ruff really the right guy to guide that team? And I'm not even necessarily posing that question as a declarative statement that he's not. But I think you look at how the team is a fairly clean slate. They don't have a lot of veterans that are going to fight a structural change. And I feel like the Devils are one of those teams that are best suited to try to do their own version of a Florida Panthers style attacking system. You look at some of their best players, with someone like Jack Hughes, it's not really a shock to see a younger player need to work on defense as much as anything else. Yeah. But even with Dougie Hamilton, while I think some of the criticisms of his defense are a little overblown, he does struggle a bit in his own end, but he's a magnificent offensive defenseman. And even in the system, Luke Hughes, by all accounts, seems to be pretty gifted offensively. Maybe not quite as much as his brothers, but to me, every sign is pointing toward a team that, at least for now, is best off trying to outscore their problems. Even if their goaltending bounces back, most of the players on that roster that are good difference makers can definitely be smart players and play some two-way games, but a lot of that still points to me to maybe just see if you can be one of those teams that's really playing track meet style hockey. And in his career, we've seen Lindy Ruff have some really high-octane teams, but I don't know if he's, at his age, if he's quite on the cutting edge of this kind of stuff. And so one way or another, I think they should have some really long talks about if it's still Lindy Ruff next season. Is there a succession plan? Structurally, do they need to make changes to accentuate the positives more? Because I'll say this, for a Devils team that had mixed expectations going into the season, that they were solid in some areas, maybe that's a sign that Lindy Ruff is getting a lot out of these guys. So it's not necessarily to say that Lindy Ruff has to go, but I would want to be modeling this team to be just, an electric team that would, how we've seen with the Wild, they've changed perception from them being kind of a slow, boring, defensive-minded team to being one of the most exciting teams in the league. And I think the Devils could break that way. That doesn't mean they can't go more two-way and more balanced, but I think that's an area structurally where I think would be really interesting for the Devils.
So another thing that's been really interesting for the Devils this year is kind of the growth of Jesper Bratt. And it's something that it's probably one of the things that really just got us excited about the season, and the one of the few things that was unexpected that is a positive for the season. But I wrote an article a couple days ago about whether the Devils in general should be worried about the overall scoring of the league. The league hasn't seen scoring like this since 1996, and every team is going to gain something from that. But I want to talk about Bratt specifically. Is this something that you think is just he's taking advantage to a higher degree of what's happening around the league? Or do you think this is a sustainable model? Do you think Jesper Bratt might just be this now? Is he a really good player, a close to point per game, or even a point per game player?
Well, Bratt's interesting because last season he had a 6.9 shooting percentage, which wasn't very nice for his results. Mm-hmm. But even then, that translated to 30 points in 46 games, which would be basically a 53-point season. That's obviously not almost a point per game, but it's if you can get a young player in the 50 to 60 range every year for a guy I think they got in like the 6th round,
Yeah.
that's a great success. I think the big question for the Devils is, he's an RFA this offseason. What's the right contract for that player? And I don't know how much of it will be them being able to leverage his RFA rights. He's obviously a player that probably sneaks up on people, but, those point results are those point results. So I would say the answer is somewhere in between that guy that was a 53-point player and one that was a point per game player. It seems like most of the time when he's on the ice is shifted in the Devils' favor. So I think, I always worry for players when they play over their heads that fans will turn on them when they have the inevitable cold streaks the next season. But if I guess the Devils are probably going to sign him to something like a bridge deal to see, like you said, where he is. He's only 23. So I think it's a pretty good problem to have. I don't think he'll be the same player points-wise. But he didn't ride Jack Hughes or any other line mate's coattails solely this season. I think Nico Hischier was his most common 5-on-5 line mate, and he still played more minutes without Hischier than he did with him. So it shows that he succeeded in a number of situations. He strikes me as versatile, and I'm a big believer that all those Penguins, Capitals teams that did get lucky in the draft lottery and sort of I don't know if the previous generation is the right word, maybe a decade, 15 years ago, those teams still tended to find at least a few key players outside of those really obvious top 5 type draft picks. So for the Devils to be able to find a gem like that every now and then, I think that's going to be a big key in getting them to where they're not rebuilding too slowly. And I don't know what the dollar or years will be for Brett, but I would say that he's everything. The COVID shortened seasons have messed up point totals, goal totals, stuff like that. It's a little harder to judge a player like that because you just don't have as many games. But it seems to me like he's at least a 50 to 60 point player, and maybe this season really is just a sign that he's almost what he's been, because again, he's in these years where you're making your biggest leaps in development. So I think Devils fans should be excited. Maybe just don't hold it against him too much if he slips a little bit next season.
Yeah, and he's been so good. He was even really good with Dawson Mercer, who's a rookie center. So he's definitely somebody who can move through lines and definitely figure it out. I agree. I think. Let me ask you one last question. How uncomfortable are you willing to get on a long-term deal with Brett? Are you willing to go to $7 million per season, or you think that's too high?
Oh, $7 million per season. I think I'd want a lot of years in exchange for that.
I'm talking
because then you're
7
buying
by
some
7.
UFA years.
Yeah.
7 by 7. It's risky, but it's kind of exciting. I think that would set him up for a little bit of, when you get that much, fans aren't going to, if he sort of, 7 times 7 for a 50 to 60 point guy who's not, like a Mike Hoffman who's sort of getting empty calorie numbers. That's, as long as the fans wouldn't turn on him, I'd think about it, because again, getting those, one thing I really love about the Devil structure is, as much as you want to take advantage of entry level years, the Blackhawks won their first cup in 2010 when Kane and Taves were both in the last years of their rookie deals. That's the greatest time to take advantage of value in the league. But, they already know how much Jack Hughes costs. They already know how much Hischier costs for multiple seasons, and Hamilton to a degree. That contract could be a little iffy, but that gives them that license to take a big swing. I'd probably be a little uncomfortable with 7x7, but I don't think it's impossible for them to get good value out of it, especially if the cap actually ever goes up. That would be a good thing for the league too.
That'd be nice. With all these TV contracts and everything, it'd be nice if we actually get a little extra on that cap.
Yeah.
Well, James O'Brien, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Give me your thoughts. Putting to rest this Devils season as we hammer through the last 5 or 6 games of the year. James, let everybody know, where can they find you? Where can they find your work?
Yeah, again, you can usually see my byline at Pro Hockey Talk at NBC NHL page, and on Twitter at Psycholike usually tweet about hockey, maybe a little bit about professional wrestling. So that's where to find me.
Definitely get that on my account too. So, and for those of you who want the I call it a funeral article. Sam yells at me because he says it's too morbid, but that's what I'm calling it. I'm calling it the funeral article from James O'Brien. I just tweeted it from the Pucks and Pitchforks Twitter account at Pitchfork Puck. Check it out. I really enjoyed reading it. I always love those articles when you come out with them, James. So hopefully when you write ours next year, it'll be much later, maybe like a May, June article, it would be nice. But, James, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. Anytime. Let me know.
Thanks, James. That is James O'Brien of NBC's Pro Hockey Talk. I caught something. I caught a nugget in that interview. Couple nuggets. The injury thing that James was explaining.
Yeah. I
didn't think about it. Yeah, the Devils are younger. Much, much younger. And some of these injuries are, you come to think of it, are kind of like once in a blue moon type freak injury, like what happened to Dougie Hamilton, Nico Hischier, guys getting hit in the face with the puck. I think there were a couple other close calls this year. But, if you want to write an article for pucksandpitchforks.com, and you want to purely troll the fan base, the title would be, is Jack Hughes injury prone? Because I think that Jack Hughes, I think it's just one of those things. It's just a freak accident that happened. I'm not too worried about Jack Hughes at the moment.
It was, they were both flukes. The shoulder injury was a guy literally tombstone pile driving him into the freaking ice.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, it was Hughes, it was a 50-50 play where Hughes made a move that he probably shouldn't have. He made an adjustment and he kind of exposed his knee. But it was an MCL sprain. He would have been out for 2 or 3 games.
Yeah.
So it is what it, like, whatever. Like 2 or 3 games is nothing when you're talking about an 82-game season plus playoffs. So
now, if you look at Miles Wood, the way he plays the game, sometimes somewhat reckless. We love it. Yeah. It's exciting. But you can make a case, hey, maybe he should play a little smarter. He was last season, but now he's hurt again. Or he still needs extended rehab, whatever.
Yeah, but here's the thing. And here's the thing about Miles Wood. I think what we saw in those 3 games, even with the getting hurt, I want to sign him long term. Give him $3 million for 5 years. What do you like? You don't lose on a contract like that.
No.
Because what he brings to the lineup every night is something we desperately missed this year. Just the physicality, the ability to just blow up a play at any given moment. He doesn't need to score 20 goals. He doesn't. If we get
he's got
10
pizzazz.
to 15 goals,
the way he skates.
If we get 15 goals from him, and just wild plays at all times from the bottom 6, he's a threat all the time. And that's what I need. I need threats. I need threats up and down the lineup. Make sure that you have threats. And I feel like That's something that Lou left us without. Is that Lou tried so hard when he was out the door to try to just build the entire roster, because he had the top 6 set. He'd Zajac, he had Eliash, he had all these other pieces. And then the bottom 6 he didn't really care who was there. This is towards the end. Towards the very end, like 2000, 14, 15-ish. And you didn't have guys fighting for those top 6 spots because nobody was good enough for that. And now, and a lot of those guys are usually younger. They're usually younger guys fighting for those top 6 spots for the bottom 6. And you just didn't have that drive. So for the longest time, we had to rebuild that. And I think we're in a good shape. We're in a good spot now where you have guys like Fabian Zetterlund. You have guys like, even like these guys who look like AHL lifers, like Chase DeLeo and a couple other guys. Maybe they're not. Maybe it just took them a long time to get really good. Because Chase DeLeo, I wrote an article last week about some of the contract situations that are going under the radar but are very interesting. And Chase DeLeo is one of them because I want to know, he's not going to get more than the minimum or more than maybe like $900,000, but I want to know, I want him back. I want him to come back to the Devils. I think there's a chance that he gets, a real chance to make the bottom 6 because he looked really good at times this year. Even in the NHL, he looked like he can belong. He didn't belong yet, but he looks like he can belong. And he looked really good in the AHL. And these are the players that I want. I want those players cycling in. I want players, and this is what happens when you have 9 and 10 draft picks in a season because you're rebuilding and you're trading down and things like that. You get a lot of shots at players like this and a lot of shots at those bottom 6 players who can be more. And, of course, we want more Igor Sharangoviches and Jesper Bratz we get in the 4th and 6th round who turn into top 6 players. Of course I want that. But you got to fill out a full lineup. And I think the Devils did a good job. And look at Jesper Boquist. We thought he was a lock to one day be in the top 6 3 years ago. And now he's not. But what he is he's a really good third-line center. And somebody with skill, somebody who plays the game right, somebody who I like a lot of what he does. And the Devils are doing a really good job of building that. And like the darn goalie, Sam, really just ruined any semblance of a good season for this team. Do I think that if they get a goalie, they're a playoff team this year? No. The playoffs were weird this year. And if you look at the standings, the East is done. And there's 2 weeks left. It never happened.
Yeah.
It's just a strange season when it comes to the standings. So I'm not saying that the Devils would be a playoff team with a goalie. What I'm saying is that we'd know a lot more about this team, and there would be a lot more optimism about this team if we had a goalie. But the good news is now we get a bunch of good draft picks while learning a lot about the offense and seeing that growth that we've been really looking for. I just don't want the losses to linger. That's the one thing I'm worried about. What happens if they go on a 3-game losing streak next year? And this all depends on the coach. Are they going to keep Lindy Ruff? Are they going to get rid of him? We keep going back and forth on this. Lindy Ruff is a phenomenal development coach. We have to figure out if that's what we need for this franchise. Obviously, it's still very young. But do we need a guy who could take them to the next level? Or do we still need a guy who's going to bring the best out of the young guys, despite maybe not making the best in-game decisions or whatever? Or, the adjustments and things like that. Because you can't deny what he's done with Jack Hughes. You can't deny what he's done with Jesper Bratt. You can't deny what he's done with Igor Sharangovich. You can't deny what he's done with Miles Wood. You can't deny what he's done with Nathan Bastian. You can't deny what he's done with Michael McLeod. And I know McLeod's not having as good a season as he did last year, but he's still a useful NHL player. You can't deny what he's done with these forwards. And you can't deny what he's done with Jonas Siegenthaler. You can't deny, how he's handled Ryan Graves. And you can't deny and I don't agree with what he's doing with Severson, but this is Severson's best season. And Severson has a ton of value because of what Lindy Ruff has done with them. So there's a lot to unpack here. There is. But I think that you got to be, if you're looking if you're looking for negatives, you're going to find negatives, right? You're always going to. And there's a lot of negative on New Jersey Devils social media, whether that's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram. There's a lot of New Jersey Devils negativity out there, but there's a lot to like. There really is, Sam. And I'm more excited about next season going into the offseason as I have been in a long time. Like I truly think, like last year, going into the offseason, I was like, oh man, I hope the Devils do enough so they're at least competitive next year. I always kept saying that. I just want a team that it's exciting. And while the goaltending situation makes this miserable, I'm at least excited to see what Nico Heischer's doing. I'm at least excited to see what Jesper Bratt and Jack Hughes before his injury and Dougie Hamilton and even Subban is looking pretty good sometimes. You know, there's a lot of things to like about what the Devils have done this year.
Yeah, and you know what? When you rattled off a lot of the positives, you're not, being unrealistic. There's a lot of good things that Lindy Ruff did this year with individual players. And Jesper Bratt, I think that's the big one. I think that's the big ticket item on Ruff's resume. I also think as well that Mikey McLeod, underrated player, in my opinion. But what about Nathan Bastian? How about Nathan Bastian coming back to the Devils mid-season and going on a tear, and Lindy Ruff putting him on the power play? Obviously Mark Recchi gets some credit. I know Mark Recchi and Nazardine had taken a lot of crap from fans in the stands and on social media, which I think is a little unfair. But then again, fans are holding the coaches accountable. They deserve better. And, they did improve in some areas. So, you know what? That's why I want to keep Lindy Ruff. Just one more year of development wouldn't hurt. But we would want to expect to be in playoff contention next season. Or at least be in, within 4 to 5 points away for that 8th spot. Not like this year, where I think next year, if they're going to get to that point, they need to figure a way how to stop the bleeding or before the floodgates open of like 9-game losing streaks. Big losing streaks. They were in the midst of a 5-game losing streak before this road trip. And they stopped the bleeding by beating the Dallas Stars. And then they beat the Arizona Coyotes. Colorado is Colorado. I'll give them a pass there.
Yeah, I mean, they're just so good.
Seattle, they should have had. They were close. But being the Golden Knights, hey, that's pretty impressive considering how desperate Peter DeBoer's team was. So, again, I think we got a few more games left. I think it's an excellent evaluation period for Tom Fitzgerald. But I think, really, Utica's success will be the New Jersey Devils' success. How far deep they get in the playoffs. If they get deep in the playoffs or even win the Calder, I will say that that experience that those young players have will become incredibly invaluable. You've seen what Fabian Zetterlund has done. He's impressed me. He's like he kind of reminds me a little bit of like Claude Lemieux, the way he skates, the way he checks, the way he hustles. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Claude Lemieux. If you take some old tapes of Claude Lemieux, the way he played, Zetterlund is sort of like that. Who knows? Maybe Zetterlund is like Claude Lemieux and shows up in the playoffs. I don't know.
And here's the thing, is that we have a lot of players who can be something. And that says, like Arn Talvati is somebody who's interesting in Utica, and there's a couple players who I like, and there's the whole Gritsyk over in Russia who looks like just a superstar. And like we haven't talked about him a lot, and I think that has to do with something that we don't need to get into. But basically, we'll just call it politics. But if he comes over, like, what does that mean? You know,
Yeah.
and then the defense, where you got Ahoy got called up today, and I think I'm saying his name wrong, yeah, but you know what I mean. I can't say that. I'm just gonna.
You want me to say it?
Sure.
Nikita Hoyuk?
Is that how I say it? Ahoyuk?
Hoyuk? I don't know.
Oh, we got to get some of our AHL friends. Oh, you know what I found out, Sam? And
What?
I'm sad about this. David, the guy we used to have on all the time, talk about Utica. He's gone. With the Louisiana.
He's in I thought it was in San Antonio or something like that.
Or is it San
He took a
Antonio?
picture. I don't know. He took a picture and put it on his Twitter account, and he's like, "Yeah, I traveled all the way from Utica to go to Utica Avenue, wherever his destination is. It's somewhere in Texas." It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I was.
So we lost our main guy. Like when anytime we hear a press conference or whatever, and he's talking on behalf.
He's in Mississippi. We were both wrong.
Yeah. Oh, okay. What's he doing down there? Got a new job?
He's a sports anchor over in Jackson.
Wow.
News is weird, man. News is weird. You know, the news business, you have to go where that will have you, and
sooner or later,
we'll
I'll be moving to Canada.
Who knows? Maybe I'll end up moving to New Jersey, Sam. Maybe we'll do these live together. What about that? That'd be interesting.
Stay in Tampa.
Jeez. Wow.
Stay in Tampa. I'm keeping my distance from everybody.
Jeez. Oh man, that was hurting.
I'm just kidding around.
Sam.
Yeah. But you still can. If you need a recommendation, you can always ask me.
Yeah. Not anymore. You're just gonna tell them to keep me in Tampa.
I'm only kidding. I need
know
somebody to talk
about.
to in Tampa anytime I'm down there.
But here's the thing. So I have a hope for all Devils fans listening to this. We have to get behind the Utica Comets. If they win tonight, and they were losing last time I checked, so I got to double check the score. But if they win tonight, they clinch the top seed in their division. We have a winner in the organization, and that's the thing that was different. Is even our AHL team was losing in previous season. Now we have a winner, not only a winner, but a team that could, they have a legitimate shot to win the cup, the Calder Cup, but a cup nonetheless, and a cup I would be very happy to have. It looks like they're winning now. I think Alexander Holt scored.
Well, that's good.
It's 4-3. Yeah, so Holt scored, and Chase DeLeo scored. So, we're doing it, Sam. We're doing big things. Vukojevic has looked a lot better. Somebody who we had on this podcast. He was the only. I think. Is he the only active player we've had on this podcast?
Pretty much. I think he's the only one. We've had an active assistant coach at one point.
We did.
Mark Recchi. Yeah, that was big.
Jared Gourley scored tonight in his first AHL game. I think he was one of they put together like a Black Aces squad from Adirondack. So I think he's one of those guys. But he was assisted by Graham Clark. Graham Clark, he's somebody who we've forgotten about this year completely because he hasn't had the best season. But he's somebody we're really excited about coming into this year. He's somebody who, like, his shot is insane. And some of the issues have come up, and he hasn't had the best season. But if he can turn it on the playoffs, Sam, he's another guy who could push for a spot next year.
Mm-hmm.
You can always use a scorer in the bottom six.
Yeah, but you know what? I gotta tell you. I mean, I think this farm system is full. I think we have depth when it comes to prospects, but we need to really start solidifying. Devils need to start solidifying some of these spots with some of the young talent that they have. I think defensively, I mean, think about what lineup will look like in 2025. I'm going to make a guess. It's going to be Nico Dawes in net. You got a big goaltender in net. You've got Dougie Hamilton. If they can re-sign Ryan Graves, Kevin Ball.
We're talking about 2025-26 or 2024-25?
24-25. 24-25 season. Think how big this defense is. With Ball and Muhammad Doolin, Dougie Hamilton, possibly Ryan Graves, with Severson. I don't know where Ty Smith. I mean, there are a lot of big boys. And Luke Hughes.
Luke Hughes. He's 6'2". He's
I'm
not
telling
small.
you. Yeah, I mean, it's a big defense.
I know Jack is small and Quinn is small, but Luke is not small.
Well, Luke is still growing. That's what I'm hoping for.
I mean, 6'2" is big, though. I'm happy with
6'2" is big. Yeah.
You know, but Shakir Mukumadulin, he's big. Or he's tall. He's not big. He's tall.
But you know what? Having that long reach like Kevin Ball. See, Kevin Ball figured it out. Kevin Ball figured use my biggest asset, no pun intended, my size. His reach, and Scotty alluded to this on Devils After Dark, like his reach in the end there against the Golden Knights, who defense and Ball. I think those two were on defense. Like his reach, Kevin Ball's reach. Kevin Ball's reach. Did you hear that?
Yeah,
Kevin Ball's reach. Yeah.
Just keep saying ball reach. Keep saying it.
Okay. Anyway. It's a disruption. No. All the passing lanes. Like you can't teach size, and that's something that Fitzgerald got right with a lot of these guys. It's not just one guy. He's got a whole like big forest of defensemen right now. With the exception of Ty Smith. Isn't he the shortest?
Yeah, I think he's I mean, relatively, yeah. I think he's 5'10", 5'11".
Yeah. He's 5'10", I think.
What's Severson? Is Severson like 6'2"?
I think he's 6'2".
Okay. Oh, okay. So, breaking news, Sam. Before we got 1 minute left on the podcast, and I bring you breaking news. Utica won, and they've clinched the North Division title. And
wow!
Right at the very end, and they are it's the first division crown for Utica since 2014-15, and the first this is sad. Per AHL Communications, this is the first division title for a Devils AHL affiliate since 1998.
Wow. That is great. See, Utica's success is our success. Go Utica. We'll have to figure a way how to get up there on a weekend for the playoffs. I bet you those tickets are going to be hard to get. But we have a guy. We have a guy that said that, hey, I could get you in with the Zamboni, but he never emailed me.
No.
On YouTube Live. We'll have to figure this one out.
We'll figure it out. Maybe we'll try to get some people on to promote the playoffs. We'll see. It's all work in progress, Sam.
We'll have to get David from Mississippi to help us out.
Come on, David. Come up from Mississippi. Go to New York State. Let's help us out.
He leaves us mid-flight. Are you kidding me?
Oh, and by the way, Sam, that Alexander Holtzcall, I just watched it.
Yeah.
He shot it between the legs.
Oh!
Between the legs. Yeah, I'm going to retweet Josh on Twitter. Josh, you're getting a little love, but go to twitter.com/pitchforkedpuck. Check out the Alexander Holtzcall. And, folks, I'm sorry, the Dougie Hamilton piece won't come out till tomorrow afternoon. because I'm going to write a Utica piece for tomorrow morning. But yeah, everything's exciting. We're doing good. We'll see you soon, guys.
Yeah, see you soon. Tomorrow, Game Day Live, 6 p.m. Eastern. Vinny Parisi and I will preview the game, Devils Buffalo, and also Devils After Dark after the game. Nick, let me tell you, I am done with the West Coast swing. I lost a lot of sleep in the past week doing these post-game shows at 2 a.m. Eastern in the morning. But want to thank all those joining us in today. Keep it here, dropping the podcast at midnight. Till next time, let's go Devils.